There are a lot of things about COVID, a lot of terms about COVID, which are going to be relegated to the dustbin of history. Terms that we don't use anymore. But there's one term in particular I want to start this video off by telling you, or reminding you of. That term is breakthrough case. You remember that? Back in 2021, people who had prior gotten COVID shots began to mysteriously get COVID. It was just baffling. No one could understand what was going on with these breakthrough cases. Now, why were they called breakthrough cases? Well, it's probably because as late as March of 2021, the director of the CDC and the CDC in general were publishing papers, which I'll show you in a moment, on their website, claiming that if you got a vaccine, you probably weren't going to get COVID. Shockingly, it's weird that something which had been settled science for all of human history when it came to epidemiology is now settled science again. That the reason they were breakthrough cases is because, get this, gang, I know this is crazy, it's hard to create a vaccine for a family of viruses from which the common cold springs. It's hard to do that. It was really hard to do all the way until about June of 2020, and now looks like it's hard all over again as we're told that COVID is going to be endemic. Everyone's going to get COVID at some point. And the very people who demonized you for not getting a shot in 2020 and 21 are now the very same people saying things like, well, we never said you wouldn't get COVID. All we were talking about was you wouldn't get a severe case of COVID. We never, who believed you wouldn't get COVID with one of these shots? That's crazy. Well, yes, full stop, yes. That would be crazy to think that one of those shots would stop you from getting COVID. But the very people saying that now and acting like, well, we never said you wouldn't get COVID, those are the very people that told you in 2020 and 2021 that if you didn't get one of those shots, well, you weren't just dumb and probably a right-wing slack-jawed Trump supporter. No, not just those things. You were unpatriotic.
All these people who have not been vaccinated, you have an obligation to yourselves, to your families, and quite frankly, I know I'll get criticized for this, to your country. Get vaccinated now. It's free. It's convenient. I promise you, it saves lives. And I honest to God believe it's your patriotic duty.
I mean, all this talk of freedom and liberty and bodily autonomy, well, your freedom and liberty, remember this, it stops at your body. If you don't get a COVID shot and you give it to me, then you've stolen my freedom and I could die. And worse, it will be blood on your hands, it was told, if my grandma gets COVID because you wouldn't get a COVID shot. Remember all that? Well, sure you do. Whole families were ripped apart by this. Businesses shut down. Our entire country, literally our entire nation, saw every state, every city at each other's throats over whether or not you were a good person or a bad person, all because some people didn't want to get a shot. People like me were called anti-vaxxers, when in fact I've had vaccines for all sorts of stuff, and I recommend other people get vaccines too. What people like me didn't want to do is take a shot for something that all of history would tell you would be impossible to stop with a shot, and that's how the shot was sold. People like me would be happy to get a vaccine if it had been proven over 5 or 10 years of study. In fact, for those of you now who want to spin this story that, oh, wait, we all know that vaccines don't stop diseases, well, in that case, Would you sign up for the polio vaccine or measles or diphtheria or whooping cough or anything, smallpox? Would you take any of these vaccines if the doctor said, look, you're going to probably get this. Everybody in your family is going to get it most likely. It's going to be endemic. But the good news is if you get the polio vaccine, well, at least you won't end up in an iron lung. Yeah, you got that, right? Would that have caused you to want to run out and either get those vaccines or demonize people around you who didn't? I don't think so. And here's the real problem. We live in a society where people allowed ignorance and fear to force them to make decisions in their personal lives that then they put onto your shoulders the responsibility for in your home, that if you did not, you were a bad person. And once a society begins to demonize people out of ignorance and fear, you've got mob rule. If these vaccines were sold in the way that people now backtrack and say they were sold, probably would have got a shot. If you told me in the beginning, hey listen, it's not going to stop you from getting it, but it'll stop you from having a severe case of it, and that's the point, that might have been something people like me would have signed on to. But you know what? Again, irony of all ironies. The very people who wanted the certainty that wearing a mask would stop them from getting or giving COVID, those very people who needed the 100% guarantees that then demonized you for not accepting anything less, those people would not have accepted the truth about these COVID vaccines. They would have then said to you, most likely, why are you getting that shot? It's not going to stop you from getting COVID, and if you get COVID, you might pass it on to me, which is where we are in 2022. COVID from the CDC on down is now said to be endemic. The very thing that people like me and others talked about 2 years ago. I'm not an epidemiologist. I didn't graduate from college. I barely got out of high school. But I can look at what science said for all of history before a certain time, and they're now saying again. And I hope that whatever cycle we go through next in this country when it comes to viruses, we take an inoculation today against the most important virus, or the most deadly virus of all, the virus of fear and ignorance. That's why I talk about this stuff. That's why I make these videos. I'm not always right. You're not always right, but the truth is going to exist whether or not we accept to see it or not. I choose to live in a world of truth and reality. I hope you will too. The truth is important. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next video.